So, what's up people and welcome to the Mission 122 discussion of Spy Family. So Mission 122 came out a while back, and as always I will leave a link to this mission that's currently being shown on the publisher's official website, Manga Plus, for free to the North American audience. So if you're interested, I will go take a look at it before they pull this mission back. Okay, so if you recall, Mission 121 was a very significant mission because we started focusing a lot more back to Operation Strix again. And it felt like Tatsuya Endo was starting to put a lot of focus with regards to the story back to the mission. And of course, at the end of Mission 121, we got a very interesting reveal in terms of Professor Sigmund Dalton. And what we find out is Mission 122 continues on with this, and we continue to see a really deep dive into what seems to be Project Apple. Although we don't know, actually at this time all we know is that there seems to be some sort of deep connection between Sigmund and Donovan Desmond. And this does make me curious in that now these chapters seem to be accelerating the main plotline, which I think is very good because I basically started this series based upon the curiosity of what is going on with regards to Operation Strix, and it was really nice to see the story go back to this focus. The reason though I say this is it seems that the story is starting to really focus and accelerate in this area, which is kind of out of character of what we've been seeing up till now. Up till now, it's been a lot of wholesome comedy, mostly focusing upon Anya and her antics at school. But if you really think about it, this does make sense in that originally when Spy Family came out, it was really interesting. I mean, the first chapter was very wholesome, but at the same time revealing with regards to the relationship that was being created between Lloyd and Anya. And then, of course, the second chapter was really cool. It was one of the coolest chapters based upon Lloyd's first interaction with Yor. But as this kept on going, you saw that the fan base really started growing due to the antics that Anya had at school. It was very hilarious, and at the same time it was extremely wholesome, and it brought in a lot of fans based upon that. And so I could see that at that time Shueisha wanted to focus on that, and potentially Tatsuya Endo was advised to focus on that part of the story. However, these days I'm starting to see a lot of people comment upon the worry that this comic is starting to focus completely on Anya and her hilarious school antics. And you don't see much in terms of Operation Strix. Yes, we have seen some reveals with regards to other areas, right? Red Circus, which actually focused around Anya once again. You saw the backstory of Lloyd. And you saw other things such as Winston Wheeler, which was very exciting, and I really enjoyed that arc. But it really didn't fall into Operation Strix, right? It was basically just another side confrontation between the East and the West. And so I could see that many of the fans were starting to worry that this story was starting to divert away from the original plotline and become this kind of wholesome story mostly about Anya with miscellaneous stories that were coming out. But potentially due to those comments that I saw, maybe Shueisha was starting to say we need to focus back on Operation Strix again and make this Spy Family a story about spies, right? And so maybe Tatsuya Endo's finally focusing towards developing that plot line, and this is the initial part of a deep dive into this particular part of the story. And I am very much in support of that because, once again, I really enjoy Operation Strix. It's probably the biggest mystery in this entire series. And so being able to learn more about that with the reveals and the plot twists gives me, at least, more information with regards to what's happening with this world in the focus of the original plotline. And so I am looking forward to seeing how this goes. And once again, Mission 122 continues to bring out that focus. And of course, this starts out with Yor going out with her co-workers because if you recall, the co-workers accused her of having an affair with this mysterious long-haired man, which turned out, of course, to be Hemlock. But when they found out that Hemlock was just another dude that was starting his job at the office, they became very apologetic to Yor. And so they're treating Yor to a dinner and some drinks. And so Yor is really happy being able to go out with them. And considering that she had a major win with Melinda recently, and Lloyd is very appreciative of being able to get Melinda's notes, this turned out to be a very big plus for Yor. But of course, with Anya reading everybody's mind right nearby, she's realizing that she is starting to lose to Mama with regards to the Operation Friendship scheme, right? Her relationship with Damien is not really moving as fast as Yor's relationship with Melinda. And so this is making Anya very worried about the situation. And so she starts reading Lloyd's mind very intently to see what she can do. And that's when she finds out that in the notebook, Professor Otten, or Uncle Sigmund in terms of Anya, was associated with Donovan Desmond. And you can see that Anya's like, Grandpa Siggy is associated with the evil superboss. And so this became a very serious event. And as she was reading Lloyd's mind, of course, because of this great discovery, Lloyd wanted to dig into this further. But he couldn't figure out a way to be able to go next door to Professor Alton's apartment and start talking with him for interrogation sort of purposes, without giving himself away. If it was just a regular gentleman with dementia, then he wouldn't worry about it. But if that was a front, and if Sigmund Alton was an evil scientist, then his prying might actually give himself away as being a spy. And so, yeah, Anya, to gain points, decides that she wants to study with Uncle Siggy again, or Grandpa Siggy, I should say. And Lloyd's really bewildered because he's like, you actually want to study? And Anya gives this explanation that because she has switched classes away from Scion Boy or Damien and Becky, she wanted to study to see if she could get back into that class again, which was a valid excuse. And so Lloyd is like, yes, I found my reason for going there. And Anya's like, yes, I'm really being a useful person, aren't I, Dad? You know, aren't I, Papa, I should say. And so they go next door to see Grandpa Siggy and Grandma Barbara. Yeah, of course, they get invited in for some tea. And while Anya starts talking with Grandpa Siggy with regards to studying once again, Lloyd decides to take this opportunity to talk to Barbara to learn more about Sigmund. And he had to be very careful because for all he knew, Barbara was also potentially an enemy, and although they looked like very innocent senior citizens, if they were part of Operation Strix, or of course the other side of Operation Strix, then they could be extremely dangerous individuals. But in the meantime, Anya goes straight to the point, and when Sigmund asks, what do you want to learn? Anya answers, I want to learn about evil organizations. And Sigmund is like, oh, that's a very unique topic. And of course, Lloyd is like, no, don't give us away. And he starts telling Anya, what are you talking about? But Barbara immediately goes, it's interesting. Anya seems to be just as curious as how Sigmund used to be when he was young. And of course, that opens up an opportunity for Lloyd to pry into Sigmund's past. And so he starts asking Barbara about how Sigmund was in the past. And of course, Sigmund used to be a very kind of free spirit sort of person, and it was that made Barbara fall in love with him. And as a professor, he really didn't take orders from anybody and decided to research and learn on his own free will. And so Lloyd wanting to learn more about this, asked Barbara if she had any photographs of the past. And luckily, Barbara was able to bring out an album. And so in the meantime, Anya's like, I gotta figure out how to get more information out of Sigmund so that I could gain points, right? And so she goes completely forward and asks Grandpa Siggy, have you ever been a part of an evil organization? And of course, Sigmund is like really surprised at that question. And Lloyd once again is really worried and says, Anya, what are you asking? But of course, Sigmund brushes it off and says it's probably a curiosity of a young girl. And to be honest, since there was a war, and if you considered violence to be part of evil, even within a war, then because I was involved with many of the situations back then I can't say that I was separated from evil organizations. Now Barbara said, what are you talking about? You devoted yourself to the nation and the people. How can you say evil organization? But Anya was extremely curious, so she went further and said, did you fight in the war? And of course, Professor Sigmund said no, because I am a scientist. I didn't really participate in the war, but rather continue to pursue my research that will help the country. And so Lloyd asks, when you say research, do you mean things that were associated with the government? And Sigmund acknowledges that. And so Lloyd goes in further and said, well, in that case, did you ever work with Chairman Donovan Desmond, who was the prime minister in that day? And interestingly enough, Sigmund immediately said yes. And he said because Donovan Desmond was such a curious individual, although they never got really close, he always would come to learn more about various things. And Anya asked, even somebody as important as a prime minister has to study? And of course Sigmund said, of course. They have to do a great deal of studying if they have to be a leader of a country. And to take that opportunity further, Lloyd says, wow, that must have been an honor for you. I can't help but wonder what sort of support that you were to him. So being a neuroscientist, Sigmund answers that basically it was a lot of questions with regards to the psychological and neural potential disorders and development of medicine for such people. And so Lloyd was like, oh, that's basically just the standard research that you would see any country do. And looking at the photos, Sigmund starts talking about the people he associated with back then. And of all the people, he talks about things like the former director of the hospital that Lloyd worked with, which may turn out to be a hint for something in the future. But even more interesting was that he associated with the founder of Gluman Pharmaceuticals, which was, of course, George Gluman's father, or George Gluman's grandfather. And Anya's like, George? Who the heck is George? And Lloyd has to basically correct her and say, he is your classmate, or maybe your former classmate. And it's interesting that Anya's already forgotten who he was, considering that she gave such an important gift of a leaf to him way back then, right? And so taking this opportunity once again, Lloyd asks if he ever met with Donovan Desmond's youngest son, Damien, because Anya used to be classmates with him. And that's when you start realizing that Sigmund is basically a gentleman with dementia, because he starts talking about the old days and he can't remember all these things. And he in fact calls Donovan Desmond Jonathan Desmond, and it's Barbara who has to correct him and say, no, it's Donovan. And even when he heard that name, Sigmund can't recall who he was. And because he's saying such unusual things, Anya decides to read his mind, and what she finds out is that even in his thoughts, he can't remember what Donovan Desmond was like, and there's a lot of confusion that he's thinking about during this conversation. And so she realizes that there doesn't seem to be any sort of evil association between Sigmund and Donovan, and she makes a conclusion that Sigmund is probably not an evil entity. But of course Lloyd can't read Sigmund's mind, and so he's sitting there on guard, wondering if his responses are just an act. And so to help assist this, Anya says, well, I think we're finished with the studying. Maybe we should just go home. And of course, Lloyd is like, you just got here. And Barbara is like, well, I thought that we could have some cookies that I made. And Anya immediately goes, oh, cookies. And they decide to stay again. And Sigmund starts talking about secret societies in the past, even though they may not be evil organizations. And he in fact talks about the fact that there was a secret society even at the university that he taught in. Once again, is that a clue for anything that may be coming out in the future? We don't know. There's a lot of these clue droppings, and we don't know how many of these are red herrings and how many of these are actually going to be something worthwhile in the future. But of course, Lloyd is taking all of this in, and he is thinking the same thing, so he's of course thinking about investigating all of these clues in the future. But in the meantime, Barbara is very happy that Anya is here talking to Sigmund, because usually Sigmund is off just staring at empty space because of his dementia, but when Anya visits, he becomes really active. And it makes her very happy to see that she can make Sigmund's stay so much more enjoyable. And so from these discussions, Lloyd is like, I guess there's not much to be able to learn at this time. If Sigmund is really having dementia, then there's not much he can ask. And even if he wasn't, there's really nothing that he can ask considering the situation that Sigmund is expressing. And so in the very end, Lloyd is thinking, you really don't know who people are. And for all we know, Sigmund may be just a easygoing guy with dementia. And so Lloyd decides that it's time to leave because there's no more information that he could dig into. And coincidentally, Yor comes back from her time with her co-workers. And Barbara and Sigmund are talking about making sure that Lloyd gives a nice welcome back kiss to Yor. And of course, immediately, Anya starts talking to Mama about Papa says that he's going to give you a big fat welcome back kiss. We have some of the most interesting facial expressions that I have seen from Yor throughout this entire series. And immediately she goes running back to the bar because she needs to get a drink. And Sigmund is like, you have such a delightful lady for a wife. And so all is well, and Anya goes back home and sleeps. And of course for the Altons, they're also getting ready for bed as well. But what we find out is that for some reason, Professor Alton has gotten into this very intense situation. He seems to be extremely tense, and Barbara has often seen that, and if that's the case, she suggests that he take his tea. And Sigmund says thank you, and decides to do so, or pretends to do so. But what we find out is that at these moments, it seems that he is starting to get his memory back. And this is one of the big reveals. Lloyd, or Agent Twilight, during the confrontation may not have been able to determine if Sigmund was associated with Donovan Desmond in some evil manner. But in the case of Sigmund, he got a major memory back. And that memory is that he remembered Anya is test subject 007. Yes. So if that is the case, then it seems like if Project Apple was the one that created Anya, then Professor Alton seems to know that because he identified her as test subject 7. And he's scribbling down a bunch of stuff, such as the letter C surrounded by brackets, and something that looks like Project Apple, but you only can read the project part, and something that may be associated with the word Apple after that. But what we find out is that, yes, Professor Alton does have dementia, but whenever his memory comes back, it is a different person that we see. Now, what we don't know is that he seems to be associated with Donovan Desmond, and also he seems to be associated with Project Apple. Does that make him evil? It's hard to say. We really don't know yet if Donovan Desmond is evil, and we really can't tell why Project Apple is creating all these subjects, right? Whether it's Anya or Bond. Now, what we do know is that the scientists of Project Apple were not particularly good people. They were willing to torture Bond to get their way, and there was a potential possibility that they were doing that to Anya and her mother as well. And so is Professor Alton associated with Project Apple? Or is Professor Alton somebody who was digging into finding out more about Project Apple, and because they found out, they turned him into a gentleman with dementia? Was the dementia something that naturally occurred, or was it something that was forced upon him? We don't know yet. For all we know, he may be the evil henchman of Project Apple, and because of his dementia, he turned into a good guy. On the other hand, how is he associated with Donovan? Is he associated positively because Donovan wanted to use Project Apple to try to control Ostania and create a war? Or was Donovan trying to resolve the war, which will go against the objectives of Project Apple, and that's how they were associated? Not as friends, but as counterparts to a conflicting situation. And so it will be interesting to see what happens. I am not sure what happens in the next situation. Will Tatsuya Endo continue to move this along, and will we get some interesting information with regards to Sigmund? Potentially, will we get another backstory, but this time around Sigmund? It's hard to say, but in any case, there is a potential danger arising from this situation because finally somebody realizes who Anya truly is, and that puts her in a very sensitive situation. And so how this moves along will be very interesting, and once chapter 123 comes out, I'll bring out another video. I hope you join me at that time. But this is the Mission 122 discussion of Spy Family. If you read it, what'd you think about it? Any comments will be greatly appreciated. And until the next episode, happy manga reading, and as always, Jaya, nice day everyone.